with Will on 531 VI.
It is 29 minutes past 8 o'clock. This is Pacific Mornings on 531 PI. I'm William Terite. It is great to have your company this Tuesday. Well, as has been well publicised this morning, Wellington Mayor Tori Whanau has announced she will not be seeking re-election. Her decision follows confirmation from Labour MP Andrew Little that he's secured Labour's endorsement to run for mayor. Tori Whanau joins me live this morning. Good morning to you.
Oh, Morena, how are you?
I'm very good, thank you. Hey, look, before we get into it, firstly, how are you feeling since the major news?
Well, it's been funny. It's a bit surreal. I've received hundreds of messages, and while there's some grief attached to this, right? Because I've cared very deeply about this role. So I am sad, but when I think about the longer term and what's important, the kaupapa, this is the right call.
Hmm. Just a week and a half ago, we had you on our show saying you were committed to a second term. It's begged the question, what's changed?
So I think it wasn't long after that interview where Andrew Little made it very, very clear that he was running, his campaign got up and running, and I read some of his statements about what he wanted to do for Wellington, and it caused me to basically self-reflect over the last week. So I probably didn't make this call until maybe even last Wednesday, I would say, Tuesday, Wednesday. I thought, okay, I actually have a lot of respect for Andrew Little. He's a great politician. He's someone I'd love to work with again one day. What's really important here are the best outcomes for our city and people working together. I didn't want this to be a highly negative campaign between me and Andrew, Labour and the Greens, when actually we're probably going to fight for the same things. And I knew he had the support, so I thought, how can I better utilise my profile, my skills, and my passions? And that's when I decided, look, I'm going to step aside. I will, clear the pathway for him to run a successful campaign. I will instead run for the Māori ward for council, and that really excites me. It means there's less of a focus on me personally, like less attention, and I can focus on the relationship with iwi leaders, getting the best outcomes for mana whenua, but really dedicate my time to things like climate action, housing and water in a really collaborative and enjoyable way.
Little pointed out, we just had him on the show before you, saying that you notified him of your plans last week, as you've given us a bit of sense as to your thinking there. Was this genuinely your decision, or were you in some ways, speaking to others and they were like, perhaps it is best to move aside?
It was mine. This was actually something I'd thought about towards the end of last year when I'd heard he was running then. But no one put their hand up. So I thought I will, because I'll always be committed to the city and the future of the city. So when no one else put their hand up, I committed myself to do that. When he announced that, just completely flipped things again, and that's okay. So it allowed me to go back to the original plan, which was if there had been a viable candidate then, I would have likely stepped aside to focus on the Māori ward. It's just it happened a bit later than I had planned.
What was the reaction when you told your Greens colleagues?
Shock. They were shocked, but also once they processed it, including my family, they went, you know what? This is quite an elegant solution to ensuring that we stay on track with the transformational plan that we have in place. And when I was at Parliament, I really looked up to Andrew Little, and I think he's he was a wonderful minister, and he's someone I look up to. And I think to myself early last week, work for him. I'm happy to work for him. And I can really get passionate and fight for the things that are really important to me. I think me and a lot of people, some people are upset I've had people cry when I told them, and which has been really sweet and beautiful. But what I like to remind them of, this is far from the end. I'm just stepping aside. I will still be there at council. I could possibly be mayor again in the future, but this is a long game, and at least this way we can sustain my energy, my passion, not have me burn out, and remain committed to the kaupapa.
And let's reflect perhaps on some of the more turbulent times during your mayoralty. I mean, I've said it time and time again, you did inherit a mess anyway, in the sense of you came in, the pipes just reared its ugly head in terms of it being a major problem that you guys got on top of. That's awesome. But a point that I'd like to pick up on is just the infighting within council. Again, it has been well publicised that Wellington Council was in a bit of a mess before you were even mayor. But I know in my experiences covering that council that there were some troublemakers that made things difficult for you, that were hell-bent on making things difficult for you, and even, wanting to see you fail. How did you, let's be honest, I mean, how have you found that whole
Really
situation?
hard. Yeah, and I think with the observer coming in, almost felt like it validated my concerns that I had about, this entrenched culture that has developed over the last few terms. And in a way, I was naive to think that I could come along and fix it. But I now have a lot of sympathy for the previous two mayors who have also had to deal with this behaviour. And I think that's also why I'm so committed to running again, because I want to start calling that behaviour out. I want to start, fighting on behalf of our people, because I think some people stand for local body for the wrong reasons, who potentially are just there to hurt others. That's not okay. That's not what democracy is about. That's not what representation is about. So that exists on the council, and it's been difficult to shift. Certainly, I found it impossible, and I hope Andrew can do a better job at that. But I want the community to know that I will go in swinging, to ensure that they're getting the best outcomes, and we'll fight against this behaviour, because it's just not acceptable.
You're somewhat restrained being in the position that you're in as mayor.
Correct. So, it has been difficult having to be diplomatic and polite all the time. And even when I see some of this behavior, just trying to be the bigger person, I have done that, and I'm proud of that. But look, I'm not going to put up with it any longer. I will be calling it out. If I see bad behaviour towards other councillors, I'm going to call it out. And next term, if I'm elected to council, I'll be working closely with the mayor to ensure that we can get the best team possible, and that there's zero tolerance on any sort of bullying or leaking and behaviour that we've seen on this council, because Wellington deserves better than that.
Hmm. And what about your voter base, or just in the sense of Wellington's, LGBTQI plus community, who are massive backers of you? I see it on our streets. I mean, what's your message to them this morning?
Just that I've still got them. I'm still here to fight for them. One of the biggest honours of this role has been to stand up for, women of colour, tangata whenua, our rainbow community, our trans community. In fact, I now have the freedom to fight even harder. I'm committed to them. I'm committed to the city. I will always be here for them.
Hmm. Before we perhaps look at what's next, in terms of what I'm keen to dive into is, are there parts that you're leaving behind once you do wrap up your time where you're like, jeepers, I wish I'd done a better job at that?
I think I've said before that perhaps I didn't always go with my political instincts. So things like Reading Cinema and the airport, were big blows. When prior to becoming mayor, those are not projects that I would have necessarily supported. So what that's taught me is to always go with my heart, with my instincts, with what I was elected to do. And perhaps there would have been less negative attention around those things. But hey, it's been done. I'm really, quite thankful for the last 2.5 years, this has been the hardest thing I've ever done. And I feel like I've almost gained like 10 years of being a politician now. So whether I become a councillor next term or end up at Parliament, I feel very well equipped. I feel resilient, and it's certainly proved to me that no matter how hard it gets, this is the mahi that I love and that will continue doing.
Yeah, and I didn't get you on here for a gotcha style interview. I think the sense of why I got you on here is in many ways to point out for our Pacific community listening this morning, trailblazing as well, first Māori mayor, wahine as well. You can correct me if I'm wrong. Is there even a woman running at this next election?
No.
No. And so, I mean, Jeepers, what do you think of that? What does that say? I mean, just a few weeks ago when we had you on the show, you were highlighting the kind of, well, the trouble that that walk in your space face.
I think that completely reflects the time that we're in at the moment. There've been a couple of studies now where the online violence and abuse towards women in politics has just reached a level that is really worrying, really concerning. It's turning people away. It's obviously turned candidates away from the mayoralty. It's made my life, a bit difficult. And I think that's a tragedy because, again, as I alluded to before, it impacts representation, it impacts democracy. We want the best people running for council, and they're not going to run for council or parliament if this behaviour doesn't change. So, my dream scenario is being elected as the Māori Ward Councillor, but also having the time to focus on advocacy work to create safer pathways for women into politics. So those studies outline things that we could do, changing the hate speech legislation and so forth. I'd love to connect with people like Helen Clark, Jacinda Ardern, and really come together and go, well, what is needed to, one, put in measures to protect women from this behaviour and other marginalised communities. Two, reduce it. But how do we stop this? And three, how do we empower more people, especially, wahine Māori, our Pacific community, to see themselves in this position? I didn't want to continue, receiving all of these horrific comments and our people seeing that. I felt like that was almost, I got used to it, and I've got a thick skin now, but there were people like my family and our future leaders seeing that content, and that's incredibly regressive. And so, look, this has now opened up an opportunity to work on an area that I care deeply about.
Look, some questions that I have for you that are more specific to our Pacific community that I'm sure they'd love to hear your thoughts on. I mean, Tala Cleverly was New Zealand's first Pacific person elected to local government in 1979, yet since she stepped down in 1995, Wellington hasn't had another councillor of Pacific descent. I suppose, given your experience as the city's first Māori mayor, what do you think needs to happen to improve Pacific representation at the council table?
Really blows my mind. I actually didn't realise that, and I think that's a travesty. What I would say is, if there's anyone in the community out there who is considering a run, to contact me. I would love to be able to support someone from our Pacific community to get onto council. I can share the challenges. I can share, some of the ways that you can kind of protect your own wairua to keep going. And I hope that they see the fact that I might be stepping away from the mayoralty, but I'm still running for council. I hope they see that as a sign that, even though it can be really hard, it's still really important. And I can be committed to council. I can help others be committed as well. Honestly, just get in touch if this is genuinely something that you're interested in.
Is it an indictment on both the Greens and Labour that they don't foster and run Pacific candidates for council, or is it merely just because we just, as Pacific people, just aren't vocal enough yet or confident
No,
enough?
no, I don't think it's that. I think our parties obviously haven't found the best way to engage with our Pacific community, and that is something we need to address. And look, I can make that commitment. Now that I'll be stepping aside from the mayoralty, I will be investing much more time into the Green Party, including that at Parliament. And I'll look at how, where we might have a gap in that space, because we'd be honoured to have more people from our tangata whenua, our Pacific community, but also, much more diversity in our party. I'd love, perhaps that's also an area I really ought to be working on.
Mm. Again, just before you've already alluded to, but we'll dig into it a wee bit deeper towards the end. But just very quickly, in terms of media coverage throughout your mayoralty, how would you characterize it?
It's, felt very dramatic and unnecessarily so. You know, there have been certain stories that I think have been blown out of proportion, and I made a comparison the other day. So there was, a whole week of relentless reporting about the fact that I sold my car. I'm not sure if you remember that, but it was just like, I think I saw 8 different headlines with certain columnists calling me a loser
Mm.
because I sold my car. And I hadn't performed well in my interviews, but look, there are much more important things to worry about. Compared to another mayor who broke the law by attending a Parliament Select Committee conference on the phone while driving. I
Mm.
think I saw 2 headlines about that. So I think there has been, what is the word? It's been, gosh, I can't quite think of the word, imbalanced. It's been a very imbalanced, and I don't know why. And it's been frustrating. And to be frank, I'm looking forward to not having to deal with that again.
Yeah. Well, look, give us a bit more sense of what you are doing next now that we are towards the end of the interview.
So I'm going to go real hard with the final 6 months of my mayoralty. There's still work to be done. We've still got to get finish up consultation and really cement that long-term plan. So I'm still going to make sure that our investment in water, housing, public transport remains at the top there. So it's going to be a really good, hearty 6 months. And then all things go well, I'll become the Māori ward councillor, but will also dedicate a lot of my time to advocacy work around online violence towards women, and also working towards greater representation in our political party, but also on council and parliament.
Right. Big stuff already. Okay. And look, now that surely you can be frank and honest now that you're on your way out. I mean, there's just reflecting back, there's got to be some parts of the job that you just absolutely despise.
I think you know, as well as the online violence or the online abuse, there's a certain section or part of Wellington who have had things a certain way for a long time. They're privileged. Um, they, they start up a group called Vision Wellington, and all they do is criticize what the council is doing because it doesn't suit them. Some of these people were on council in the past. They didn't make the investment needed into water infrastructure, and that's why we have to pay $1.8 billion towards water infrastructure today. So people are upset at this council for the increase in rates, but it's stuff that we have to do because it wasn't done before. Now, it's easy for them to throw stones and create negative campaigns and talk about back in their day. But what they need to realize is that, our community is changing. It's becoming more diverse. It's becoming edgy. It's becoming bold. And actually, that column that you wrote the other day really highlighted exactly what we're about. So I think there are some people really struggling with that, and they're responding to that with extreme negativity. I really don't like it. I didn't like it because, to me, all I could think was, why aren't you thinking about the future of the city? Why aren't you thinking about your grandchildren and what city they will inherit? It's time to think about being a good ancestor, not what you have or don't have today.
Indeed. Any final comments, perhaps? I mean, I'm sure it will be a rather emotional day, an emotional week ahead for you, and an emotional few months as well.
Yeah, I think I would just encourage people to get out and vote. As we talked about before, there are some, not nice characters on council, and they're not necessarily the sort of people we want representing us when making these important decisions. So have a look at who's running, who's got your best interests at heart, and get out and vote.
Wellington Mayor Tori Whanau, thank you so much for your time this morning and all the best today as well. Really appreciate it.
Ora.
You're listening to